Good morning, everyone. My name is Amber, and thank you so much for attending our Play Attention special webinar today. Today, we will be talking about the top 10 reasons you should have play attention in your school. So this will be a little bit quicker webinar than our normal one, but it still will be a lot of great information for you and for your school. So again, my name is Amber. Just to give you a few things before we get started today, we will be recording this webinar. So if you have colleagues that aren't able to attend, if you're a parent and you want to share with the teacher, you will be getting that recording after the webinar today via email, so watch out for that. Also, you'll notice at the bottom of your screen, there is a chat box. At any time, if you have any questions at all, don't hesitate to go ahead and ask your question in that chat box. And please do ask those questions because it does enhance the experience of everyone else. You'll also see down below where you can raise your hand. Just to make this a little interactive and fun, I may occasionally ask some questions where I will ask you to go ahead and raise your hand if you can relate or if that's something that makes sense for you. So again, those are just a few things. At any time, if you get disconnected from our webinar, no worries. Just go ahead and click back on that link that you got in your email, and that will get you logged back on. And again, you will get that recording at the end, so don't worry, you won't miss anything. So again, my name is Amber, and just to share a little bit about myself, I am an educator. I have a master's in education, curriculum, and instruction, and I've spent the last 15 years of my career working in secondary and post-secondary schools, working with students to help them increase their academic success through plans and programs, and just really help them, succeed and reach the potential that they're at. And play attention plays such an important role in that. Also, the last 10 years of my career, I've spent doing grant writing to help fund a lot of those programs. So grant writing for schools and for nonprofits and helping them manage those grants as well. So again, we will talk just briefly about funding today, but if that's something that you're interested in for your school, no worries, we can set up a time offline to talk more about your school, to talk more about your nonprofit, and kind of look at some funding opportunities that you may have. So we'll go ahead and get started today, because I know your time is very valuable. So again, thank you so much for being with us today. So again, we're going to cover those top 10 reasons why your school should have play attention. Okay, so the first one here is studies show that 1 in 3 students are not receiving accommodations for their severe ADHD. And that is just so astounding. The studies already show that in every classroom, there's at least one student that has ADHD, and that's an individual that's diagnosed. That doesn't include individuals that aren't diagnosed. So in this study, it shows that 1 in 3 that have severe ADHD, unfortunately, are not getting the help that they need. This study was done with the Center of Disease and Prevention, as well as the National Survey for Diagnostic Treatment of ADHD and Tourette's. So again, it's very important that we help these students, because when we're talking about students with severe ADHD, there's so much that is affecting them on a day-to-day basis. They're not able to focus in. They're not able to, pay attention to what's going on. They have that frustration because they don't have any wins. They're constantly not meeting the bar that other students may be meeting because they're struggling with, and oftentimes they're struggling with weak executive function. So often we see that weak executive function goes hand in hand with ADHD. And when we're struggling with weak executive function, we're unable to control our attention, our behaviors, our emotions. We're not able to plan, prioritize, organize, and really avoid that procrastination. And for a student, that's very hard to do. And so often they are very bright. They know how to read, they know how to write, they know their math, but they're struggling with those day-to-day functions. They're not able to process that information to give you the answers that you need in the classroom. So we need to strengthen their executive function. And that's really the core here at Play Attention. We're going to strengthen that executive function through neuroplasticity. And we do that with the cognitive training exercise, as well as the core of our program, the body wave feedback. And that's going to give us immediate and constant feedback of their attention. That's something that they've probably never experienced before. So being able to strengthen that executive function, not only are you going to help build their skills for them, you're going to give them those accommodations that they need to be successful in your classroom. Number 9, studies also show that accommodations that we currently have for IEPs and 504 plans are not effective. This was actually a study done in 2016, and what they found is what we have right now for our current IEPs and 504 plans, the accommodations that we currently have in place are those extended test times, those frequent breaks, getting the test read to you out loud, using a calculator, having distractions removed from the testing room. And those are so important for students that are struggling. But think of it this way. If you give a student an extended time to do their test, but they're not able to have those skills to focus, to pay attention, to move freely from one task to another, to get on that task and complete it in an appropriate amount of time, that extra time is not going to make them be any more successful. And unfortunately, we know that in this day and age that so often our funding in schools are tied to our standardized tests. So if you have a student struggling with ADHD, with weak executive function, that they're not going to be able to score regardless of the accommodations we give them. They're not going to be able to score at the level that we know that they can. So we want to be able to build that for them, and so that they have those skills. So if we do need to add in those accommodations of the extended test time, they're able to focus, they're able to pay attention. Because at the end of the day, that's what we want them to do. It's not that these accommodations are bad. They're just being placed on students that are struggling with the day-to-day processing. So providing some of this information is just not helpful for them. So again, it's so important to have play attention in your school, because we're helping these students build that skill to be able to pay attention. They're able to focus. They're able to avoid those distractions, all of those things that they're struggling with on a day-to-day basis. Number 8, play attention has an educational correlate for every game that we have, meaning that each of our games have a specific cognitive skill that they are addressing. Now also remember that all of our games address attention, all of our games address processing speed, and all of our games address that impulsivity, because we know those 3 things are very important to address when we're dealing with weak executive function and ADHD. Those are really the core of what we're struggling with that we need to build skills around. However, each of the games then takes those 3 items and also addresses another cognitive skill to build for them. So again, not only are we, teaching these cognitive skills that are needed and giving them that feedback technology, we're also making it customizable, because again, we know there's not a one-size-fits-all when we're working with students, right? Every student has a different strength. Every student has different weaknesses. So we want to make sure that we are addressing each student individually. You might have a student that does really good with their short-term memory, but they struggle in social environments. You may have a student that does really well socially, but struggles with their spatial memory. So now these are all the games that we have available at Play Attention. Now again, we're not going to get in depth into those, into the games and Play Attention specifically, all the specifics. But remember, we are always willing to do a one-on-one free consultation with your school, with you as a parent, with your organization. If that's something you're interested in, really getting into the nuts and bolts of Play Attention and finding out how we can customize it specifically for you and for your school, just go ahead and type consult down in the in that chat box, and we'll be able to reach out to you after the webinar to give you more information and to get that consult scheduled for you, because we want to give you all of the tools necessary to understand how vital Play Attention can be for your school. Also, I did fail to mention earlier those studies that we had about the 1 in 3 students with severe ADHD struggling to get help, as well as the accommodation. If those articles are of interest to you, you can type those down below in the chat box as well, and we'd be more than happy to provide that information for you. So just a little bit more here, back to the games. So again, all of the games here on the screen address your attention, they address that processing speed, and they address impulsivity. And we're going to talk a lot about impulsivity specifically in a few slides, because that's such a huge piece of when we're dealing with weak executive function and ADHD. But, you know, we also may have a student that struggles with that multi-step process, right? If we give them verbal instructions, get out your book, grab your pen, grab a piece of paper, they may get their book out and not know where to go next. So short-term memory is a great game that we can add in that's going to help build that multi-step process, help them remember facts, help them remember things in sequence. Again, I mentioned social skills. So maybe you have a student that really struggles socially. You have a child that really struggles socially. Social skills addresses that. It focuses on expressions. It focuses on social cues. So not only, again, are we addressing the attention, addressing the processing speed, addressing the impulsivity, but we're also then addressing social skills in that game. So each of our games here, again, have an educational correlate that match up with a specific cognitive skill as we're going through. Okay, let's go ahead. Now, number 7, play attention is evidence-based, which we know is very important for educators to have that evidence-based study. There was 3 studies conducted by Tufts University Medical School. And again, if this is something you're interested in reading more about, just type Tufts down below and we'd be happy to send you those studies. But what Tufts University did is, you know, there's a lot of cognitive training games out on the market now, right? Lumosity, Brain Train, and you know, they help with cognitive skills, but play attention is very different, right? We're different because we provide more than just that cognitive training. We provide you with that feedback technology as well as that behavioral shaping program to really help you implement those skills, practice those skills, see those skills in real time. You know, as educators, when we're educating our students, you know, we educate them with immediate feedback, with constant feedback. You know, if we have younger students that are learning their sight words, we're going to give them that immediate feedback if they're correct. Same with math facts. You know, as we teach, we give them that immediate feedback. And as an educator and an observer, it's very, very hard to give that feedback when we're talking about attention, right? Because we can't see it. You know, sometimes they might look like they're paying attention, but we're not sure. So providing that body wave armband is really the core of our program, and that's what really gives you that immediate feedback. And we're going to talk more about that body wave armband here in a minute. But Tufts University wanted to know if that body wave armband and the behavior shaping program, were they integral to helping students build those, you know, those skills of executive function? Or could we just give them cognitive training, right? Could we just give them the games and they would learn the same thing? So they went into Boston Public Schools and they worked with students that were identified as ADHD. The first group of students got the full play attention system. So they got the feedback technology, they got the behavioral shaping program, as well as the cognitive training games. Group B, the second group, got just brain games. So like Brain Train, Lumosity, very similar to that. And the third group was their control group. So this group received nothing. At the end of the study, the play attention group was the only group that saw universal improvements in academics, social, behavioral, as well as executive function, with no other increases in other interventions. If they were on medication, they did stay on it, but they had no increases. Where the second group didn't experience those universal improvements, and they also had increases in their intervention. So many of them had increases in medication and other therapies that they were on ahead of time. So it really showed that those additional pieces that we add in, the behavioral shaping program and the and the body wave armband were really integral to helping with that transfer and generalization and reaching that level of permanency with these skills, because that's what we want to do. We want them to have these skills permanently. And actually 6 months later, after the study, Tufts went back in and conducted another study with those same students to see what that permanency looked like. And the play attention group was still the only group that saw that universal improvements in all areas. So it really showed that they had that level of permanency. So again, if this is something you're interested in reading more about, all you need to do is type Tufts down below and we will get you a copy of that study. Number 6, so again, now we're going to talk more about that body wave armband. We have the most advanced feedback technology that's actually NASA inspired. So our technology is inspired from technology that NASA used to train their astronauts. So this is what it looks like here. This is the body wave armband, and actually here it is right on the screen. So this is our customized, this goes with our customized neurocognitive training games, right? So this is really the core of our program here. You know, as I mentioned, when we talk about feedback technology and we talk about instructing and we talk about teaching, again, that immediate and constant feedback is what is so important when we're learning, right? Because we, you know, even as adults in a new job, you know, we learn by feedback. You know, when we start a new job, it's something new. Maybe there's tasks that we haven't done before. So when we get that feedback, we know if we're on the right track or if we need to redirect. And again, when you're talking about attention, really that's hard to do without technology, because again, and you can raise your hand for this one. Have you ever worked with a student where you've said, Johnny, pay attention to me? And he says, I am, but you know he's off in the Bahamas. You can tell by looking at him that he is not paying attention. Now, go ahead and raise your hand if that's something that you've experienced. Okay, it looks like several of you have experienced that. So definitely something that we've all experienced. But who's experienced that child that seems like they are paying attention and they are focused in, but again, they're daydreaming. They're off in another land. And by giving them this feedback technology, they're able to see their attention in real time. They're able to get that concrete and controllable attention. They're going to see when they're paying attention, but they're also going to see when they're not paying attention. And that's what's so integral to building that neuroplasticity in your brain. So this feedback, this goes right on the arm. So there's 3 sensors on the back, and as long as those are touching skin, it's going to pick up the brain activity indicative to attention. So your brain gives off an attention signature when you're on your optimal level of attention. And so the body wave armband is able to pick that up, and then it transfers it via Bluetooth wireless to the software on our computer called Sheer Genius. So it works in conjunction together, and so your students are going to be able to manipulate the characters on the screen with just their attention alone, okay? So they're going to be able to pay attention and focus, and with their mind, move that character. They're going to see that happen in real time. They're going to now know what it is when they're paying attention. They're going to see it, and they're going to feel it. So the goal so for attention stamina, the character's at the top of the screen. They're going to focus and pay attention and move that character down to the bottom of the ocean with just their attention alone. As long as they're focused and paying attention, they're going to be able to keep that character down there. And that's the goal of that game. Keep that character down at the bottom of the ocean by continuing to pay attention, to direct our attention for longer periods of time. But at any time, if they start to get distracted, something happens outside the classroom, something happens inside the classroom, they start to daydream, whatever that distraction is, the body wave armband is going to pick that up, because now they're no longer in their optimal level of attention. They're no longer giving that attention signature. And now that character is going to start to move back up to the top of the ocean. Now, again, giving them that immediate feedback. Now they're no longer paying attention. So it does a great job to give them that immediate feedback and that constant feedback as they go through the game. And that is what's so integral to this program, and Play Attention provides that for you. Number 5, play attention teaches and supports mindfulness. We know that mindfulness is so important for our students, regardless of if they're dealing with attention stamina or attention difficulties, right? We know that we're in an environment now where there's a lot more anxiety, there's a lot more schedules to follow, there's a lot more, expectations for our students to have. And so that can cause anxiety, that can cause a racing mind. And when you're dealing with a student that has ADHD, mindfulness is the complete opposite of what's happening in their mind. Their mind's racing. They have, it's almost like a million TV sets on in their mind at one time. And, when we talk about mindfulness, that's really, that's really the exact opposite of what we're dealing with here, right? So when we're looking at mindfulness, it's being in the present moment. It is, quieting our mind. It's helping reduce that anxiety. It's help reducing that constant chatter in our minds. And so all of the games that we have here at Play Attention, they all address attention, or they all address mindfulness, right? So all of them have a component of mindfulness, meaning when they're playing the games, they're in the present moment. They're required to work on the task at hand. So they have to focus in and pay attention. And when their mind starts to wander, when it starts to race, that's when they have that, they're no longer in that state of mindfulness, but they're getting that immediate feedback. So Play Attention does a great job. So if you're looking for a way to integrate mindfulness into your classroom, helping your ADHD students with mindfulness, Play Attention, again, is another fabulous tool to use because we integrate that into the system. Additionally, we have a game that focuses specifically on mindfulness, meaning that the game that we have helps them get into that state of mindfulness quicker so they can quiet that mind, so they can quiet that anxiety. The way that game is a character's in a yoga room. And when they're focused and paying attention, they're going to be able to open a lotus flower one petal at a time. And their goal is to open that flower one petal at a time till it's completely open with just their attention alone, just getting in that state of mindfulness. As they complete that game, they know how long it took them to complete that task. And then every time they go to play that, Sheer Genius is going to have them do it a little bit faster and a little bit faster, which is going to help them learn to get into that state of mindfulness quicker. This is a new game for us. We just launched this game right after Thanksgiving, so we've had it on the market now for a few months, and it's been, really helpful to our adolescents that are dealing with a lot going on emotionally, a lot going on, in their environment. It's really helped them with that anxiety and that racing mind. Number 4, and this is huge, especially for educators, we have out-of-the-box customization. And what that means is, as I mentioned earlier, Play Attention is not a one-size-fits-all, because a one-size-fits-all does not fit for individuals with ADHD. Like I said, one person's strength is different than another person. So we want to focus on those areas that each student needs. So Play Attention offers customization for each student. So when you purchase the professional system, you are going to get unlimited licenses. And in those unlimited licenses, you're going to be able to give each of your students their own user and login. So each of your students is going to have their own user, login, and password. And that way you can customize the system specifically for them. Additionally, Sheer Genius is going to track all of the information specific to that student. And it's very easy to use. When you purchase our system, you'll be assigned a personal executive functions coach. And they're going to be able to help you every step of the way. They're going to teach you and train you how to set up these different profiles, how to do it. And it is a very simple task to do. And once that you set these up, Sheer Genius really takes over for you. It does a great job of automating the system. And what that means is, when you set up the system here, you're going to be able to determine how many games the student plays every time, and you're going to be able to determine what games they should play. Now, when we're talking about gameplay and how long they should play and, the level of permanency, we know that after about 40 hours of training, a student has permanency. And that's what we're working for. We're working for an end, a light at the end of the tunnel, right? We're working on having them gain those skills so they can use them for the rest of their life and every aspect of their life, their whole as they go into college and into the workplace. So what 40 hours looks like is we recommend that they do at least 1 hour of training a week. Now, depending on your schedule, depending on how often you see the student, you can really break that up in a lot of different ways. The two most common ways that we see is either 4 15-minute sessions, meaning 4 different days a week, though will go on for 15 minutes apiece. They'll probably play 2 or 3 games, and that's what that top level is, that sheer genius setting is for. Or 2 30-minute sessions. And if they play 2 30-minute sessions, they'll probably play 4 or 5 games. So depending on your student, depending on their level of attention, depending on your schedule, you can really customize it to what works best for you and for that student. So you'll determine how many games they're going to play, and then you'll determine what games are useful for them. Do they need attention stamina, social skills, visual tracking, and time on task? Or do they need spatial memory, working memory, academic bridge? What games do they need? And when you select those games, then Sheer Genius is going to determine what games they should play every time they go to play based off their performance from before. So again, it does a great job of, once you set that profile up for that student, it becomes automated. And so when that student logs in, there's no work that needs to be done other than starting those games. So it does a really great job of being able to customize it for each student, but very automated customization. So it makes it very, very easy to use. Okay, so number 3, let me just double check that we don't have any questions. Okay, so number 3, student data is tracked in easily to read graphs. So that's my other thing that I hear all the time from especially teachers and professionals that use Play Attention is, I spend so much of my time tracking data. I don't get to do the one-on-one coaching. I don't get to help them with goals. I don't get to help them move forward because I'm spending all of my time tracking. Because as educators, we have to show now in black and white what we're doing is working, or where did we go wrong, or what is successful. So it's so important for us to track that data, right? But it can be so time consuming, especially if you're working with, if you have a very large school district, you're working with hundreds of kids, and you need to be able to focus on really training those kids and helping them with those skills and coaching them. So Play Attention has done a great job with the help of our artificial intelligence, Sheer Genius. You've heard me talk about Sheer Genius a couple times, but really working to make everything automated and track all of that data for you. So what that looks like is there's a couple different things. First thing about our reporting and our data is each student, you're going to be able to set up a circle of success for that student. What that means, if you have individuals that have a vested interest in that student and helping them reinforce the skills that they're learning, helping them with their achievements, they would be in the circle of success. So that can be parents, grandparents, other teachers, a therapist, whoever is vested in that student's life and seeing them succeed and helping them reinforce the skills that they're learning will be in the circle of success. And this is great because you enter that information one time in that student's profile and it's there. So now you can share data with that individual with just a click of the button. You don't have to look up their information again. You don't have to, oh, I've got to make a note later to go into that student's profile. With just a click of the mouse, you can send report data to that circle of success individual so that they get immediate feedback and report cards of how the student's doing. Additionally, there are lots of reports. So when I talk about sending them reports, here are some of the examples. And if I showed you all of the examples of what we were working on, what we could offer you for data, we would be here all day. There's so many different ways that you can correlate the data, that you can look at the data, but it's going to start collecting data from day one on that student. It's going to track how long that they were able to play, what games that they played, what their level of attention was, what level of the game they are on. You can track their behaviors in here, you know, if they fidget a lot, if they have a lot of those self-distracting behaviors, calling out, things like that. You can look at all of that data from day one all the way to the present time. You can also look at data in correlation. So we can look at, from the beginning of time, how did that student do with their attention on compared to the duration of the game. And what that means is most of our games start out at 5 minutes apiece. So the game starts and it runs for 5 minutes, and at the end of the 5 minutes, it automatically stops. Now, you may have a student that has very severe ADHD, very severe weak executive function, attention difficulties, and 5 minutes for one game might just be too much for them. And that's okay. We deal with that day in and day out when we first start with some individuals, especially some children, that 5 minutes is just too much. So if they get to 2 minutes, and they're really struggling, they have that frustration that we know so often accompanies children with ADHD because they don't have those wins. They have that frustration. They always feel like they're hitting the wall and they can never get one pass. So if they start to even sense like they're getting frustrated, you can always end the game. So you stop the game. Sheer Genius does a great job of tracking the information of where you stopped at. And then next time you go to pick that game up, Sheer Genius is going to say, okay, so you played for 2 minutes last time. Today, let's try for 2 minutes and 15 seconds. So it's always going to challenge that student, but we want to give them a level of success, right? Because if we're not giving them that level of success, it's not helping them grow. But that challenge is always going to start from where the student is right now, because one student can play 5 minutes. But one student maybe can only play 1 or 2 minutes. So we're always going to start and then increase them from where that student is. And that's another piece of that customization. So this correlation shows of, you know, the blue line's attention, and then the orange line is duration. So what did that look like? Were they able to pay attention for longer periods of time? When they played shorter, how did that grow? When did we see a shift in that? So all of this data is available for each of your students. And again, you can send it with one click to that circle of success, or you can always download it in a PDF or a CSV file. So, you know, you can share it with other educators, with your administration, you know, with anybody that needs to see that information. Okay, so number 2. When we're working, when we talk about number 2, we're talking about focus assessments. So focus assessment is a norm test of attentional control that we use here at Play Attention. Now, if you have something in place that you're using to assess your students of where they start out at, that's okay. No problem at all. Whatever you use, if you want to continue to use that, you are able to. But we like to provide focus as an option. Again, remember, this is optional, not something, it isn't included in our standard package, and we'll talk all about pricing at the end and what the cost of this is to add focus in. But we like to provide it as an option if you don't have an assessment tool in place already. So focus assessment is a very simple assessment that we do. It's computer-based. It's 20 minutes. It's a link that you will have the student do. So they can do it in the classroom. If they have the ability to do it at home, they can do it at home. They'll open the link. There's a short little demo of the activities that they'll be required to do during the 20-minute assessment. They'll do the assessment, and then the results will come back to you. The results are going to give a lot of great information of what areas maybe they have weaknesses in these 4 different areas of attentional control. And it really gives you a great baseline of, number 1, where they started, and where at the end, how far they've come, okay? So we like to do it always in the beginning, so that pre-assessment, where are they starting? What does that look like? And in a minute, I'll show you an assessment so you can kind of take a look at what the report looks like. Sometimes we'll do it after 20 hours, because remember, on average, that permanency is 40 hours. So we'll do it at 20 hours, make sure that we're continuing on the right path. Do we need to maybe customize a little bit more? And then again at the 40 hours to see where they're at. Are they ready to graduate? Do they need a little bit longer? It gives us a really good, again, apples to apples comparison of where they started and where they're at after the 40 hours. Now, when we talk about 40 hours, I didn't mention this earlier. Like I said, we recommend 1 hour of training a week. So when we're talking 40 hours, that's about 8 months to go all the way through the program. Now, some of our students may take a little bit longer. And again, that's not a problem. It's not going to ever quit cold turkey at the end of the 40 hours. And you always have that support from the executive functions coach that's going to help you through that. Okay. So just remember that you're never alone. You always have that support. Okay. So when we look at the focus assessment, there are 4 different areas that we are going to test, okay? So we're gonna look at consistency, performance, impulsivity, and distractions, okay? So consistency, if if a student's struggling with consistency, that's gonna be your student that has a 15-minute assignment and takes 3 hours. Starts an assignment and needs constant redirection. Starts a million things and never finishes any of them. So when they're lacking in consistency, they're struggling with that. Or you have a student that one day knows their math facts, they're on it, things are going well, and then the next day it's like they don't even know them because they're lacking that consistency. So we know if they're lacking consistency in their attention, there are specific games like attention stamina, academic bridge that we can put into their profile that's going to help strengthen that. Okay. Performance, that's your daydreamer, right? Your slow processor, your individual that struggles with verbal instructions, struggles with multi-step processes. Okay. So if you have a student that struggles in those areas, again, there's certain games that we can put in short-term memory, spatial memory, working memory. We can put those into their profile, and that's going to strengthen that and really build that skill for them. Impulsivity. Now, I mentioned earlier that I would talk about impulsivity. And remember, play attention, all of our games within play attention address impulsivity because it's such a huge factor when we're dealing with weak executive function. And, I'll work with someone that their child has, is a low in performance. And they say, but they're a daydreamer. They're not hyperactive. I don't think they're impulsive. But remember, impulsivity shows up in so many different ways. It can show up in anxiety, can show up in making careless mistakes because you're trying to rush through. It can show up in being rushed by nature, even if you're a daydreamer. It can show up in so many different ways that it's not always behavior and hyperactivity, right? Impulsivity is showing up and, oh my gosh, I have a deadline and now I can't focus in and I'm just not going to do anything. So often when we're working with individuals, whether it's a child or an adult, we see that impulsivity range anywhere from 80 to 100%. Okay, so that's not uncommon at all. And that's why we address, all of our games address impulsivity, because we want to make sure that we are addressing that and we're working on that impulsivity because it affects every aspect of that executive function. And we want to help build that self-regulation so they're able to stop and think before they act, okay? And then finally, distractions, okay? So distractions are, how do you perform when you're distracted? Are you more distracted visually or are you more distracted auditorily? And again, we can add games in there to help build that. And there's also other tools that we can build in as well. If you have a student that really struggles with environmental noise, maybe in the beginning, instead of listening to the sounds of play attention on a speaker, they wear headphones. So they hear the distractions and play attention, and they're starting to help train their brain to avoid those, but they're not distracted by that environmental noise. And then as they get, a few weeks in, a few months in, and we start to see that transfer and generalization, then we remove those headphones, okay? And then we work through that. So lots of different information that this report gives us. And let me give you, I'll go ahead and switch my slide now so you can see. So here's one from Kara. She was 6 when she started and 7 when she got done with her 80 play attention sessions. So she did 2 30-minute sessions. So this is 40 hours. 2 30-minute sessions a week for 80 sessions total. Again, this is norm-based. They're going to go off their age group, so it's going to test them against their peers. So you'll see the blue line is where she tested. The light purple is below norm. The dark purple is norm. Now, the first 2, consistency and performance, are positive benchmarks, so we want to push those as far as we can to the right. Okay, now the other two we're going to talk about are negative, so we want to push those to the left. So as you can see, when she started, she was at 24%. So definitely below the norm for her age group and consistency. But again, we don't want to just push them to the 51% of the norm, because as they get older, that is going to grow, right? It's going to get larger. It's going to go to the right. It's going to continue as they learn. And that's why we run into a lot of students that do really well until maybe they hit middle school or high school, and all of a sudden they're catching up with their age group and they're really starting to struggle. So we always want to push them back. So you can see after her 80 sessions, she went from 24% to 88%. And then with performance, she started out at 6%. So she definitely was a daydreamer. Her mom discussed that she, it was almost like a bomb could go off and she would not be aware of it. So very internal, a very slow processor. Through 80 sessions, we were able to, again, put her past that norm and get her to the 72%. Now, when we talk about impulsivity and distractions, those are negative benchmarks. So we want to push those all the way to the left. Again, the blue is where she tested. Light purple, below norm, dark purple, the norm. So she was at 88% of impulsivity. And it's so, that's very common, but even more common is the 99 to 100% that we see. Because again, it affects so many different aspects of that executive function, and it shows up in so many different ways. But you'll see here that at the end of the 80 sessions, she was down all the way to 1%, which is also very common for us to see because we address it in all of those games. And then you'll see her distractions were very high, and we were able to get her down even below where that norm is for her age group. So really great results. But again, this assessment is able to give you that ability to show a parent, to show an administrator, to show another teacher where they started and where they ended at the end of their sessions. Okay. And now, without further ado, number one reason why play attention really needs to be in your classroom. A couple months ago, we did a blog post about what tools can be implemented to make ADHD students most academically successful. Okay, what can we put in place for them to make them achieve academic success? The University of Exeter went into schools and really looked at what tools are available, what accommodations were out there, and did a lot of research on students with ADHD to find what were the most effective for them. And when we are able to increase them in their academic success, that in turn increases those standardized tests. Like I mentioned, unfortunately, a lot of our funding now as educators are tied to those standardized tests. There are report cards. And so, if you have a student that is struggling, again, they may very well know those math facts. They know how to read. They know how to do those science problems. And they know how to do that reading comprehension, but they're struggling to stay on task. They're struggling to control those impulses. So until we put the tools in place to help them be successful, they are still going to struggle, and they're not going to have those wins with those standardized tests. So the reason why this is number one is it's so very important here. And so again, and if you're interested in reading that blog post that we posted, go ahead and just type school blog down below, and we'll make sure you get that as well. Because it's a very interesting article, very interesting study. And what they found is there are three main things that consistently increase academic success in students with ADHD. Daily report cards, so getting that feedback, goal setting, helping them set goals to that next level, and reward structures. And what was so important about all these three things is one-on-one, right? Doing it on a one-on-one environment, because again, we want to make sure things are customized for each student, because each student deals with things a little bit different, and they have different goals. Different rewards might motivate them differently. And the reason why this is the number one for why you should have play attention inside your classroom is that play attention offers all of these items. All three of them, well, number one, play attention is a one-to-one system, okay? So you're gonna do one student, one coach. Now, if you have 100 students, that can seem very overwhelming as an instructor, as a teacher, as an educator. But remember, we can train numerous people to help with that coaching. We have schools that use teacher assistants. We have schools that have parent volunteers come in and help. So lots of different avenues for that. So don't ever feel overwhelmed with the one-to-one, because the one-to-one is what makes it effective, because we're customizing it for that specific student. So number one, we do everything in play attention and one-to-one. Now, we do have the opportunity to do group training. We do have the opportunity to do remote training, and that's through our iLab system. So if iLab, group training, remote training is something that's interesting for you, type iLab down below and we can get you some information after the webinar. But all of these, the three items that study listed, the daily report card, play attention provides that. It gives immediate feedback, as a matter of fact, because it's giving you immediate feedback of when you're paying attention and when you're no longer paying attention, right? So it's giving them that immediate feedback, but it's also giving them an immediate report card as soon as they're done. So here's what it looks like on the screen when the student gets done playing a game. They're gonna know what their attention was. They're gonna know what level of the game they're on, how long they were able to play, if they had anything incorrect, any impulsive strikes. And this is not compared to another student. This is specifically just their information. So they're getting that immediate feedback. Also, if they have any behaviors that we're tracking, if we have any self-distracting behaviors, calling out, fidgeting, biting on things, chewing on the pencil, we can track all of that through Sheer Genius. So it's giving them immediate feedback of how they did, okay? And Sheer Genius does a great job, because again, this is all automated. Nothing you have to do, it's picking up all that data as they play. Then the great thing is, not only do they get that data as soon as they're done, next time they go to play that game, they're gonna get that data as well. So it's gonna tell them, okay, this is what you did last time. And that's what leads to the goal setting, okay? So number two thing that was important for academic success in students with ADHD is that goal setting. So again, Sheer Genius says all of this is all automated, nothing that you have to do. And remember, we're always customizing it to where that student is and then building from there. So here's an example you'll see on the right-hand side, today's game goal. So this was for an intermediate level for a student. The intermediate level goes for 6 minutes. So you'll see last time they played for 5 minutes. So today's goal is 5 minutes and 13 seconds. So small, manageable goals that they can reach, but always pushing them to that next level and then that next level. And again, all automated for you. And then the great thing is, once they start meeting those goals, they can earn points. And then those points can be cashed in a rewards program. And again, this rewards program is super customizable. You can make it generic for all of your students, or you can make it very specific for each student. You can make 5 minutes of recess, 10 points. You can make, a pizza party, 200 points. So can be very small or very big. And the big goals are important because as they start to build that self-regulation, they start to help with that, prevent that instant gratification. So many of our students we're working for now, they get a point, they want to cash it in, right? Because they're so impulsive. They're instant gratification. But as they start to gain that self-regulation and build these skills, they're able to go a little bit further and have those goals and get those, save those points for bigger rewards. So that is really the number one reason that makes this play attention so helpful for your classroom and such an integral tool in your school, is because it provides the most effective learning tools for academic success for students with ADHD. And it's all customizable and it's all automated. Okay. So we're wrapping up here, and I know I went a little bit past 30 minutes, so I appreciate you hanging out with me today. But when we look at this, the glacier analogy, all of you I'm sure have seen that. What we see on top is totally different than what we see below. And we want our students to read, to listen, to keep still, to not fidget. But for them to do those things, they have to be able to do all of the cognitive skills on the bottom. Okay, and play attention provides all of those skills, again, in a customizable, very easy to use system. So really, when we talk about the integrated feedback, we talk about that behavioral shaping, we talk about the cognitive skills offered, We're really the full package, okay? So if you're interested in going ahead and purchasing for your school, we'd be happy to help you. You're always welcome to call our 1-800 number when we're done here. However, our phone lines do get a little bit busy after a webinar. So if you would like a call back either to purchase right now or for some additional questions, just go ahead and type in your phone number in the chat box and we'll make sure an associate gets back to you, okay? So that wraps us up today. Thank you so much for hanging on with me and you know, and just really looking at the top 10 reasons why play attention is so important for your school and all the benefits that it can do. I do have a couple minutes. If anybody has any additional questions that you would like to ask. If not, again, if you're interested in having an associate talk to you through some questions, you can type your number below. If you're ready to go ahead and get started today, you can type your number in for that as well. Anything that you've typed in up to this point, we'll make sure that we get to you, especially reference information. So any questions? Okay. It doesn't look like we have any follow-up questions today. So, you know, thank you so much for your time. I appreciate it. And we look forward to working with you. Have a great rest of the week. Thanks so much. Bye-bye.